Link just woke up from a 100-year nap, Zelda is caked up, and Ganondorf is just over there doing whatever. This is Breath of the Wild, Nintendo's largest and most ambitious Zelda game to date. Also, Breath of the Wild is barely a Zelda game.
What you say to me, you little shit?
Listen, if Link and Zelda and Giant Fart weren't here and the Master Sword was called the Sharp Stick of Doom, and Koroks were called Idiot Dumb Plant Babies, and Hyrule Castle was just a white castle, this would barely be a Zelda game. You could argue that if you take away the visual identity of any Zelda game, it would no longer make it Zelda, but I feel like that isn't necessarily true. For example, if you removed everything that suggested Twilight Princess was a Zelda game, it would still, from a gameplay and game loop standpoint, feel like a Zelda game. It would basically just be Okami. There's so many similarities in it that people consider it to be the closest thing you can get to a Zelda game without it actually being part of the franchise. Okami and Twilight Princess were both compared very closely because of the wolf form that you get to play as, but there's so much more in Okami that makes the game feel like Zelda. Whereas if Okami came out now next to Breath of the Wild, none of those comparisons would have been drawn because they just don't exist anymore. The traditional Zelda game loop, the thing that makes Zelda feel like Zelda, was completely abolished in favor of Breath of the Wild's open world setting, which is totally fair. Nintendo wanted players to have full freedom to explore the world as they please, and the traditional formula would have kind of gotten in the way of that. Obviously, every video game franchise needs to go through some sort of evolution at some point to keep players interested, but that can sometimes leave people craving the traditional formula. But anyways, before we get too deep into that, let's talk about the opening moments of Breath of the Wild. In only 2 minutes, Link hears the disembodied voice of Zelda, finishes his bath, and then we're free to control him and run around. Link gets a fancy new iPad, downloads some episodes of Cocomelon, and leaving this cave, we get a glimpse of the world we're about to spend the next 80+ hours exploring. From here, you're pretty much free to go and explore the Great Plateau, which more or less doubles as a tutorial area for the game, which is absolutely crazy because the Great Plateau is almost a whole game in itself. There's a little bit of dialogue with this old man, and then he tells us to download some more Cocomelon at this point of interest. Cocomelon. And after doing so, he strikes us a deal. We clear the 4 shrines in the Great Plateau, and he gives us a glider so we can explore the rest of the overworld. Each of the 4 shrines gives us a rune for our iPad. Stasis for freezing items in place, Magnesis for moving metal objects, Cryonis for creating ice platforms, and Bombs for...
What's this?
Tequila?
I don't know, it was supposed to explode.
These runes replace the items traditionally found in dungeons, and the shrines more or less replace the dungeons themselves. And let me tell you, I've got some words to say about this shrine business, but let's get off the Great Plateau first. So after hitting up each shrine and meeting the old man at the top of the once great Temple of Time, the same one that's for Ocarina of Time, that's pretty cool, we learn that he's actually the ghost of the King of Hyrule, and Zelda's in trouble, and Link's been napping for over 100 years or whatever. He gives us the glider, and off we go into the massive world of Breath of the Wild. At this point, you can go any direction you want. Like literally, if you want to run over to White Castle and battle Ganon right off the bat, you can. But he's a fart and you can't punch farts, so it's better to do some questing first. This is an insane departure from traditional Zelda. Ultimate freedom is the ultimate dream for an open world game, but no longer is there this build up to the final battle with Ganondorf. Instead of it being something I was building towards, it ended up being something I wanted to avoid in fear of ending things too early and missing out on what the game has to offer. In Breath of the Wild, Ganondorf is simply just a stinky fart cloud off in the distance that I've been given no real reason to deal with other than he's evil and he's stinking up the place. I mean, I guess we do have to go save Zelda as well, but I'm a little bit preoccupied at the moment. I found a dog, okay? What do you want me to do? Not pet it? Aww. Psych, you can't pet dogs in this game. 0 out of 10, Nintendo. Seriously though, how did they get away with this? You can feed the dog, you can become its friend, he can lead you to treasure, but you can't pet it? Miyamoto, I thought we were friends. Why would you do this to me? Alright, I've got so much to say about this game, so like my Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword videos, I'm gonna pull another category card and split everything I want to touch on into their own separate categories. So here is everything I want to touch on in their own separate categories in no particular order.
Wait a minute!
You you say to me, you little shit?
Listen, I'm gonna be comparing a lot of things in Breath of the Wild to Elden Ring. I have always judged these Zelda games based on how they stack up to the current gaming landscape. And yes, I know Breath of the Wild is several years older than Elden Ring, but considering they're probably the two best open world games I've ever played, I just can't help but compare the two. Besides, Elden Ring did so many things better. For example, why do the horses still suck? Why did this horse get stuck on this rock? This rock is flat. How are we this far into the Zelda franchise and the horse mechanics are still suboptimal? Why in a world where giant fairies and ancient sci-fi laser beam death robots and fish people and tiny dumb baby plants do the horses need to continue to be realistic? Half of the time the horse can't hear my whistle or it gets stuck on what seems to be nothing. Elden Ring has the best damn horse I've ever seen. You can summon it with magic, it can double jump, it can literally turn a 180 on a moment's notice, you can fit so much spaghetti in this bad boy and it never gets stuck on anything. Oh, are you getting deja vu? Well, join the club, because I've had these exact same complaints before about Twilight Princess, a game that is 16 years old at this point of time, and here we are with the same f***ing issues. Dude, even the horses in this game know they suck. Mine literally gave up. They're weird, I'll say it. The layout feels strange, and swapping items and switching to your bow and whatever just feels overly complicated. Playing Breath of the Wild feels like learning to play the piano. Sure, you can hit a bunch of keys and make noise, but it's not gonna sound good unless you figure out the right combinations. It makes sense in theory, but actually executing the controls when in a tense situation just feels messy. Also, side note, why have a stamina meter when I'm running just on flat ground? Like, what's the point? Let me sprint across the field. Elden Ring lets you sprint forever unless you're in combat, which makes total sense. Why can't I do the same here? You can even upgrade your stamina, which is great, but if you accidentally use all of it and exhaust your stamina meter, you have to wait for the entire meter to fill back up before you can sprint again. Why does it punish me for utilizing my upgrade? Sure, I can sprint longer, but now I have to wait longer for it to fill back up? It makes total sense for climbing, but simply running? I don't know, man. It bothered me. I ended up resorting to using the horse whistle glitch that lets you infinitely sprint, and as a player, I feel like I shouldn't have to resort to tricks to make my exploring feel less tedious. That being said, everything about this game is designed to encourage you to take things slow and really take everything in, which for a first playthrough totally works. I'm already going to take my time on my first playthrough. There's sights to see and I don't want to miss anything, but I don't need the game to force me to slow things down. On a second run through, I've seen the sights, I know what I want to do, just let me do it. Let me pet the f***ing dog. Back to the controls thing, the messiness is especially apparent in combat. It constantly felt like I was scrambling to stay alive, only overcoming the enemies because I fumbled around long enough until they were dead. I never felt in control of any given situation. Unlike in Elden Ring, everything you do feels deliberate. There's no fumbling trying to switch to a bow and activate a bomb and switch back to a weapon and then switch to fire arrows and open a can of Pepsi and study for your SATs. Souls combat becomes rewarding when you've learned the enemy's patterns and movements and you dodge and parry accordingly. I can 100% recognize that I'm trying to play this like a Souls game when it's not a Souls game, and the combat is meant to be a little more experimental and creative, but they've changed things enough to the point that the combat is starting to feel more like a Souls game than a Zelda game. I just can't help but make the comparison. I mean, the last console Zelda we had was Skyward Sword, and the combat in that is completely different. Because the combat here feels so Souls-like, it also feels like it's missing a large component of the Souls combat, and that component is a dodge roll. Any traditional Souls game gives you a block, a dodge, and a parry. These are kind of like an internal difficulty system within the combat. Blocking is pretty darn easy, dodge rolling is moderately difficult, and parrying is hard, but it nets you a really large reward. Breath of the Wild only has a block, a flurry rush, and a parry, and the flurry rush and the parry are basically the same thing, as they both let you counter an enemy's attacks. The parry is a lot harder to pull off, but it doesn't feel like it really gives you that much of a reward, and the flurry rush, being a little easier to execute, has a huge negative side effect if you don't pull it off correctly. Basically, you have to activate a jump as an enemy's attack is incoming, and if you mess up that jump, you get knocked out of the air and you have to wait for Link to quit flailing around and get back up before you can continue the fight.
It is my pleasure.
Do you see how that could be annoying? In Souls games, your main means of defense is a dodge roll, and in Breath of the Wild, it feels like it wants your main means of defense to be blocking, and blocking is so unbelievably mundane and boring. Everything from the convoluted weapon swapping menus to getting knocked out of the air because you messed up your flurry rush and trying to exploit the physics to keep an enemy down just makes the combat feel messy and sloppy and poo-poo dum-dum bad. I don't like it. Link's jumps that he does for the flurry rush don't have any iframes, and a dodge roll is something that is very much used to deal with multiple enemies at once. Overall, I just personally didn't really vibe with the combat, and can you believe that that's not all I have to complain about? Is it just me, or is it hilarious that this trident, an ancient heirloom wielded 100 years ago by the legendary hero Mipha, just broke after like 4 hits? A lot of people hate the weapon breaking in Breath of the Wild, but I don't think it bothers me in the same way that it bothers other people. Other people are upset that their weapon that they had that was really cool and really strong is broken all of a sudden, but what bothers me is that it just completely interrupts the flow of combat. Every time a weapon breaks, you have to open your weapon menu, which pauses the game basically, switch to the weapon you want to use next, and then get back into the action. It's totally jarring when you're in the zone in a fight, and it happens so often. I would far prefer if it just auto-swapped to the next weapon in my inventory. I could go through before combat and sort them in the order I wanted them to be used in, and then I could just go ham spanking these little Boko blins across Hyrule Field. The weapon breaking, forcing me to have to go find a new one, was not a big deal at all. I actually think that it was a really smart way for them to encourage the player to go explore, and a good way for them to fill out the overworld, but also, I don't like it. Sure, they had lots of stuff to fill the overworld with, but the problem was every single chest that you came across had one of 3 things in it. A rock for selling, some rupees, or a weapon to use in your next combat encounter. It was almost always one of these 3 things, and with my apprehension to get into combat in the first place, I ended up having a full assortment of weapons to choose from anyways since I was just hoarding them. It got to a point where stopping to pick up that chest I could see over yonder was kind of pointless. If I needed another weapon, I'd just get it from the next chest I found.
Boomerang! You do always come back!
And sure, money is great, but I never found myself needing it all that often. There was nothing I could have missed by not opening a chest that would have had any major impact on my adventure. Elden Ring also has items peppered throughout the overworld, hidden in nooks and crannies and secret corners, just like Breath of the Wild, but if you don't pick up every damn item you see, you could be missing out on the greatest discovery of your minuscule little life. Maybe that item over there is your new favorite weapon, or a near mint shadowless base set Charizard, or maybe it's the key needed to progress the game, or unlock a new girlfriend. I think she likes me. I found myself exploring literally every nook and cranny that possibly could have had an item sitting in it, and like 99.9% of the time, there was an item sitting in it. But in Breath of the Wild, I never felt the need to, because around another corner would be another chest with another of the same 3 items in it, and a lot of the time, there wasn't even a chest in that little corner I just took the time to get to anyways. It was never crucial, and it never felt overly rewarding to go out of my way just to open a chest. I miss the days of actual, proper dungeons. The shrines got some neat concepts, but after a while they became predictable. Metal block? Obviously I use magnesis. Moving object? Obviously I use stasis. Listen, I'm only stupid sometimes. The shrines felt less like figuring out a puzzle and more like executing a task. There wasn't often that portion of thinking, how do I actually complete this? It was more often just a glance at the obstacles in the room and a little bit of time putting everything in place. Some shrines were complete jokes. This one, for example, locked door over there, chest containing a key over here, you just... Or this absolute joke of a shrine. You walk in and you got these weight scales, right? You literally just have to shoot these 2 ropes, a block will launch you in the air, and ta-da, you completed the shrine. You're so smart. I'm so proud of you, kid. You're going places. You're going places, little guy. Little guy, you're going to the moon if you want to go to the moon. Just drop a bigger block off from the rope platform and you'll get there. Are you kidding me? That was the easiest puzzle I've ever seen in a Zelda game, and fuck off with your it's a game for kids argument. So is every other fucking Zelda game, but a lot of them have challenging, fulfilling, creative dungeons. Have you played Skyward Sword? If you haven't played, do those dungeons and try to tell me the shrines are better. I won't listen because I'm stubborn and always correct. The runes are super cool, and the shrine idea is great for an open world game, but damn if it didn't feel like the same 4 or 5 puzzles were just remixed into different shrines. And there is 120 of them, not including the DLC. That's a lot of shrines to be based on only 4 different runes. All that being said, some shrines were absolutely brilliant, like this one that requires you to bring an ice block through a maze of fire before it melts. You have to get creative with stasis and magnesis, golf this block through the obstacles, and it made you have to really plan out, execute, and think about how to get this puzzle completed. This is the kind of stuff we need to see if the shrines are going to continue to be a thing in Tears of the Kingdom. And don't say anything in the comments, I haven't played it yet. I'm getting there, we got like 4 more Zelda games to go. You could argue the actual replacement of the dungeons in Breath of the Wild are the Divine Beasts. I would argue that the Divine Beasts are boring and easy, and I don't like them. That is what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that. I was playing the Va Booba's Divine Beast or whatever, and my stream was spanning channel points like always, and after all of the distractions, I gave the game my full attention again, and I was already done with the Divine Beast. I beat it without even paying attention. I was on autopilot, and I beat Divine Beast Rad Booba. Are you kidding me? A dungeon is supposed to be a challenge, a perilous escapade into the unknown. I used to have to save and quit and come back the next day whenever I got to a new dungeon in a Zelda game because I knew it was gonna take a while for my stupid idiot little child brain to overcome the challenges within it. But these Divine Beasts I can complete while literally thinking about Funny Monkey? Even the bosses at the ends of the Divine Beasts weren't that great. Each boss is a blight of Ganon. Thunder Blight was easily the coolest and most challenging. His thunder letting him knock weapons out of your hands added a really cool complex layer to the combat. Water Blight was kind of just annoying with projectiles and platforms you had to navigate. Wind Blight I quite literally shot with arrows until it died, and I don't even remember what the 4th one was. The pre-Divine Beast encounters, however, were such a fresh addition to the franchise, and I absolutely loved all of them. Speeding along on Azora's back, Michael Phelpsing up a waterfall and shooting shock arrows at its weak points? Come on, Nintendo, did you make this game just for me? Is what I would say if you would let me pet the fucking dog. These encounters are just so cool. These types of moments are what makes Breath of the Wild so good, and a lot of these moments are found throughout the exploration. Breath of the Wild is the type of game that makes you want to see all the sights. I want to climb this mountain to find out if there's a stupid, dumb little idiot plant baby on top. I want to find all the supplementary story locations so I can watch this cutscene. That's a thick-ass ball! The exploring and the happenings, as I like to call them, in Breath of the Wild are what really makes this game special. Coming across a guardian for the first time, or spotting the mysterious green glow from Satori Mountain, or even simply experiencing one of the thunderstorms are just all such cool experiences. The world of Breath of the Wild holds so much to see and do, and this luckily makes up for the lack of the rewarding items found throughout the world. I found myself exploring for tranquil moments like this. Chaotic encounters like these.
Oh, fuck.
Not for the monetary or physical rewards of exploring. Walking up to the edge of a cliff and discovering a massive labyrinth in the distance and wondering how the fuck you're gonna get over there is the kind of shit that makes this game amazing. Please stop. Zelda sounds like she's about to cry every time she speaks, Link nods and looks serious all the time, and Mipha is a fish lady. Why do I feel this way? That's all I've really got to say about the story. The majority of it was like, hey, you're not the legendary hero.
POV, you're the legendary hero, but some dumb old guy doesn't believe you.
Well, that pretty much settles it. Here's my family heirloom. Oopsie. Another highlight of Breath of the Wild is the way that its toolkit is set up to interact with the world. At one point, I had the idea to use a metal block to shield myself from Guardian's laser beams, and it totally worked. At another point, I used a big old rock and stasis to launch myself across a gap to reach a shrine, and that also totally worked. Being able to experiment and create new ways to overcome obstacles is loads of fun, and it really puts Breath of the Wild on another level, albeit a different level from traditional Zelda. Pretty much every time I thought to myself, I wonder if this will work, it did, and that's pretty dang neat. Breath of the Wild is the very first Zelda game to ever have DLC, and this DLC is the absolute highlight of the entire adventure. We start off with a no-hit trial, granting us a B-stick of health and a one-shot obliterator. Taking out some enemy camps unlocks a few more shrines to complete, most of which are on the better end of the shrine spectrum. I gotta say, spanking a moblin on the booty with a one-shot obliterator is pretty hilarious. We then have several locations to hunt down to find mini-trials that then unlock illusory battles with the Ganondorfs. These battles knock the originals out of the absolute park, giving you a limited toolkit to use to defeat them. You now have to plan your battle using your weapons wisely and defeat the boss accordingly, making them not just intense but also puzzles in their own right. Easily the best bosses in the game. Then after that we unlock an actual, real dungeon to complete. This is hands down the best dungeon, shrine, divine beast, rad booba, or whatever you want to call it in the whole game. It uses the new style of Breath of the Wild physics-based puzzles and throws it in with some more traditional feeling challenges, and it all leads up to a final boss battle with a giant ancient Sheikah dude. This is peak Breath of the Wild. Everything leading up to the DLC was great, but this is just fantastic. If Tears of the Kingdom follows the lead of this DLC, we might have the best game Nintendo has ever produced on our hands. And don't say anything in the comments! Jeez! Stop! I see you typing down there, cut it out! So as you can tell, the DLC is pretty amazing, but why is the reward for completing it all a fucking motorcycle? Give me a magical ancient Sheikah technology horse. Even Nintendo doesn't like the horses.
Bye, have a great time.
After the magnum opus that is the DLC, it was finally time for me to take out the giant fart cloud looming over Hyrule Castle. I prepared myself with some tools to help take out the guardians defending the castle and cooked up some grub so I could have some backup health ready for the upcoming trials.
Where's the recipe book? Why do I have to cook one dish at a time? Just let me mass produce meat skewers. That's all I know how to cook. You're telling me the main means of me getting my health back is cooking meals and I have to do it one at a time? I don't want to cook anymore. I want to die.
After cooking my life away, I was as prepared as I could be to infiltrate the castle. And after an entire 5 minutes, I made it to the room that triggers the final boss fight. All this buildup, like 80 hours of gameplay and trials and divine beast laser beam activation, and I ended up taking one path that leads right to Ganondorf's doorsteps. Remember how I mentioned the buildup from traditional Zelda games? Everything leads up to this big ass final dungeon and encounter with Ganon, and in Breath of the Wild it took me all of 5 minutes to clear the castle. I speedran Ganondorf's Uber Eats delivery of an ass whooping, and I didn't even mean to. Luckily, I possessed the ability to exercise my own free will, and I went to explore more of the castle before ending things. And as fun as it was looking around, I ran into that same issue I had before when exploring. I found more weapons, which I didn't need, and I found more crystals to sell off to the crystal girl at that one shop. Oh my god, as a Sagittarius, I don't leave home without my quartz.
What you say to me, you little shit?
So back to the task at hand, it was time to face. Overall, it's a pretty solid fight. He's massive compared to you, and I sure do wish I had an actual dodge roll, but it's a fun and somewhat challenging fight. I do kinda wish it went on a little bit longer though. If you defeat all 4 divine beasts before taking on Ganon as intended, they all do a combined laser beam attack, dropping Ganon's health to half, which is a neat reward for going the extra mile and doing all the beasts, but it kinda takes away from the insurmountable challenge that is supposed to be Ganondorf. It's just another thing that softens the impact of the build-up leading towards the adventure's crescendo. It felt like it cheapened the experience. It makes me want to not complete the actual intended divine beast quest so I could get the full Ganon beatdown experience. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and also just a weird personal vendetta I have against myself to do things the hard way, or else it doesn't really count. But anyways, we defeat the ugly bastard, get teleported outside of the castle, and in a final horseback battle, we shoot the glowing spots with light arrows, classic Legend of Zelda style, and defeat Ganon once and for all. Zelda finally, after 100 years, is released, and the story ends with Link and Zelda setting out to rebuild Hyrule. As awesome as this game is, there is just so many things missing that I love about the Legend of Zelda series, and a few quality of life issues. But what it lacks, it makes up for in a gorgeous overworld and exciting encounters throughout it. If Tears of the Kingdom is going to lean even more into this new formula, which from the trailers I've seen it looks like it will be, I think it needs to remedy it by including more traditional things like dungeons and leaning into the RPG aspect of things. Give us more armor sets and maybe some talismans or unique items to really make exploring all the nooks and crannies worth it. Simply discovering a cool new location was rewarding in its own right, but I really missed the discovery of a new powerful tool or item upgrade we got when delving into dungeons. That said, the new style of sandbox puzzle experimentation has led to some really fun experiences, and I think more of that could be really fantastic. So in conclusion, do all of these new mechanics make Breath of the Wild something different from what I feel is a Zelda game? Well, maybe, but Zelda's still in the title, so Breath of the Wild gets a solid number 4 on my list. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been 8 months since my last Zelda video. Hopefully it won't be 8 months until the next one, but I am gonna shift my focus a little bit and play some more weird games. So, maybe new Juice Galaxy video soon? But anyways, if you want to support the channel, do the commenting, the liking, the sharing, all that stupid YouTube bullshit, or you can even join the channel now as a member to support. One of these days, I'm gonna be doing this full time, so you just stick around until you get weekly content. Anyways, I love you, I appreciate you. Always pour the milk second when you're getting a bowl of cereal, and I'll see you next time. Mwah.